The story starts with a group of explorers out in the middle of the South Atlantic Ocean. On their ship, there's a weather officer named David who reports on the weather. They're headed to an island right in the middle of the ocean. The government sent David there to observe the island's changing weather. He was supposed to stay there for almost a year. After collecting weather data throughout the year, he was to come back. David was provided with a year's worth of food and all the supplies he'd need. It was a journey of several days. After a while, they finally reached the island. They got off the boat onto the island. The island was completely deserted. There wasn't even a single bird in sight. There was a lighthouse and a small house where David was supposed to stay. Before him, a weather officer named Robert had lived there, but his duty period was over. He had stayed alone on the island for a year, collecting weather data. Now David was going to stay there for the whole year to collect weather data. And the old officer Robert left on the ship. They were about to leave. But when the whole team visited the house, they were shocked because there was no sign of anyone living there. Inside the room, all the old officer's stuff was scattered around. After that, Captain and David thought maybe someone was in the lighthouse. Without wasting any time, they headed towards the lighthouse and saw a strange sight. The whole lighthouse was surrounded by sharp, pointed wooden stakes, like someone had purposely blocked it off to keep anyone from going inside. Then Captain and David knocked on the lighthouse gate several times, but there was no response from inside. Finally, he pushed the gate hard and went in. Inside the lighthouse, they found a man named Gruner. When they asked Gruner about the old weather officer Robert, he replied that Robert was dead. He went out to sea and never came back. Hearing this, both David and the captain were shocked. After all this, the captain told David that if he still wanted, he could come back with them. But David refused to go back. David thought that if he could give the government an accurate weather report for that island, he could earn a pretty good amount of money. After that, the captain gave him a gun for his own protection and told him, "This place doesn't feel safe to me. Take care of yourself." Then leaving David there, they all headed back and planned to return only after a year. After the captain left, David settled the house a bit and made it livable. When night fell, he found a diary in the drawer. It belonged to the old weather officer, Robert. In that diary there was a lot written about the island. The diary mentioned some mysterious creature, but nothing was clear. Some parts were incomplete. David read every line carefully. There were also sketches of strange animals in the diary. David couldn't figure out why those pictures were drawn. Maybe the writer was lonely and did it just to pass the time. On one page of the diary, there was also a photo of the old officer's wife. David got tired reading the diary and slowly dozed off. The next morning, David checked the weather data he started collecting. But as soon as he reached the shore, his steps came to a halt. He noticed some stones arranged in a strange way between the rocks, with shells placed among them. David thought maybe Gruner had done all this. With that in mind, he got back to his work. While working, he looked towards the lighthouse through his binoculars and saw Gruner with another person. But in the blink of an eye, the second person vanished. David tried to spot him again, but soon thought it was just his imagination. That night, David stayed busy with his work. There was a knock at the door. He thought it might be Gruner. David called out his name, but there was no answer. Holding a lamp, as David moved toward the door, he suddenly heard a strange noise. Then he saw a weird creature's hand trying to reach inside from under the gate. It definitely wasn't a human hand. Seeing that, David felt the ground slip from under him. He immediately ran toward the basement and hid there. Within moments, that mysterious creature got inside the house. She was wrong. She was sneaking around looking for David. And David was watching her through a small crack in the basement. The creature noticed David moving. Then it suddenly ran towards him, trying to grab him through the crack. To save himself, David quickly grabbed a knife and stabbed it in the eye. The creature screamed and ran away. But it could come back any time. And David was now sure that what was written about the creature in the diary was true. Terrified, he couldn't sleep all night. When David stepped outside in the morning, he saw some footprints in the sand that didn't look human at all. The tracks led straight into the sea and just stopped there. That's when David finally understood why Gruner had put those sharp wooden spikes all around the lighthouse. Now David realized that if he stayed in this house, those creatures could kill him anytime. Terrified, David ran toward the lighthouse, shouting at Gruner to open the gate and let him in. But Gruner wouldn't let him inside and said, "You should have gone back with the ship, David." Feeling defeated, he turned back because the coroner didn't even want him near the lighthouse. The coroner splashed water on him, telling him to get lost. Now he had to handle things on his own. He boarded up every window in the house, surrounded it with sharp wooden stakes, and piled old papers and books outside the gate. Then he soaked them with oil so if the creature came back, the fire would scare it away. But there was on box. Inside it was a gun and a bunch of bullets. Seeing that gave him a little hope of surviving as the sun started to set. Fear began creeping into David's heart, and soon the darkness of night took over everything around. David sat quietly in a corner of the house, holding the gun. His heart was pounding fast. Then he heard a strange noise, and when he peeked out the window toward the sea, it felt like the ground beneath him gave way. He saw not just one, but a whole bunch of those weird creatures coming out of the water, heading straight for him. Within moments, they all gathered and started trying to break down the door. David immediately began firing his gun, and some of the creatures fell dead. David thought the gunshots would scare them off, but seeing their comrades die only made them angrier. So David came up with a plan and set fire to the papers and old books kept outside the door. Seeing the fire, the creatures got scared and retreated back into the sea. But now the fire had reached David's house. The door caught fire and slowly started spreading because the whole house was made of wood. David quickly wrapped himself in a sheet to save his life and ran outside, hiding behind a big rock near the lighthouse. While shooting at the creatures, he got a pretty deep cut on his hand. Then suddenly, it started pouring rain. The fire began to die down slowly. But even after the whole night of rain, David couldn't save his house by morning. The entire place had burned down to almost ashes. Now if David wanted to survive, he had to take shelter in the lighthouse. He grabbed his rifle and headed toward the rocks near the lighthouse. He hid and waited for Gruner to come fill the water. When Gruner stepped out of the lighthouse to fill the water, David quietly followed him. But then, suddenly, a strange creature near Gruner attacked David. Somehow, David managed to control it. The creature was Gruner's protector. Just as David was about to shoot it, Gruner stopped him and said, "Wait, this is my pet." David didn't fire, and taking advantage of the moment he made a deal with Gruner. "If this creature stays alive, if you want to keep it, let me stay in the lighthouse. Otherwise, I'll kill it." After that, Gruner agreed because David had plenty of food and gunpowder. Before it got dark, the two of them took the leftover food and headed back to the lighthouse, where they both slept comfortably. The next morning, the creature was quietly licking David's hand. When David woke up, he saw that his hand had completely healed because of the creature's licking. David was shocked to see this. Now David wanted to learn more about this creature from Gruner, and then all of this would become known to the world. He wanted to reveal it because it was nothing short of magic. David thought that if they brought this creature's secret to the world, both he and Kroner would make a ton of money and get famous. But Kroner didn't want any of that. He didn't want to leave the island at all. Kroner had no one left in this world. For him, the island was perfect. A place where he saw himself as a king, ruling on his own terms. That's why he had written all over the island that Kroner was the king here. But David just couldn't understand why. How did this weird creature become Kroner's burden? So, Kroner explained that once he saved its life, it accidentally got caught in his fishing net. Back then, the creature was small, and since that day, it stayed with Kroner. It started obeying everything he said. But Kroner was a tough guy. He treated this creature really badly. Every day, Kroner had physical relations with it. Kroner said that once this creature even attacked him. And in return, Kroner gave it such a punishment that after that, the creature by itself. He started thinking of Kroner as a slave. And you all probably figured out why those creatures come out of the sea every night. They come to rescue their friends from Kroner and take them back. But Kroner doesn't let that happen. Those creatures can't attack during the daytime because the sunlight burns their skin. David didn't want to stay here. He wanted to find some way to escape the island. Anyway, evening was setting in, and Kroner told him to get ready with a gun because those creatures could attack anytime. They got ready to turn on the lighthouse light, and in no time, a huge number of creatures started coming out of the sea. They were moving toward the lighthouse. Kroner kept firing at them non-stop. But David was completely scared. He started moving inside the lighthouse. Despite Kroner telling him over and over, he just sat quietly in a corner, and soon after David fainted. Kroner fought those creatures alone all night. The next morning, Kroner angrily splashed water on David's face to wake him up and said, "If you want to stay alive, you'll have to kill them. Otherwise, you'll be kicked out of the lighthouse and have to follow all my orders. You'll need to fetch water every day, handle all the small and big tasks around the lighthouse, and stand guard with me at night." David didn't really have any other choice. That's why doing all this became a necessity for him. David started obeying everything Kroner said. But there was one thing he absolutely hated, having to physically torture that female creature in different ways every single day. Night falls. They head out again for guard duty. They get ready, and once again, those creatures come out of the sea. But today David wasn't scared. He started firing at the creatures. But today Kroner didn't do anything. He left David outside, closed the lighthouse gate, and quietly sat inside so David could learn on his own how to fight these creatures. That's how David spent the night fighting, and morning came. In the morning, Kroner saw David sitting outside the lighthouse gate, covered in blood. Now he had learned how to deal with these creatures. He had to fight. Time just kept passing like that. Fighting those creatures at night and managing the lighthouse during the day. The island had started feeling like a locked-up prison to him. He kept thinking about when he could leave this place and finally breathe free. Over time, David developed a strange kind of friendship with that female creature. He began feeling sorry for her. Now he understood how hard it is to be alone after leaving your own people behind. Maybe that creature felt the same way. David even gave her a name, Anarius. Days went by like this, and then one day they noticed that the attacks from those creatures were slowing down. David thought maybe they moved somewhere else for the winter. Or maybe they realized fighting these two wouldn't get them anywhere. But Kroner told him that wasn't true at all. They'd attack again, and now they were increasing in number. A few more days passed like this. One night, after dinner, Kroner and David started playing chess just to kill time. But that's when Kroner made a big mistake. They both got so caught up in the game. They completely forgot to turn on the lighthouse lights. Taking advantage of the darkness, the creatures attacked them. David saw that there were so many creatures that even two people together couldn't fight them off for long. And this time they had no plan at all. Their gun bullets were almost finished too. Somehow, barely escaping, they made it to the top of the lighthouse. But in the process, Kroner got a deep injury in his leg. The creatures were overwhelming them today. Both felt their death was certain. But luckily morning came. As soon as the sun, slowly, the creatures start to come out, then leave the lighthouse and head back into the sea. After the scorching sun comes out, Anarius tries to heal Kroner's wounds. But by now, David had realized they couldn't win this fight against the creatures. Their bullets were almost gone, and they didn't have enough food to last much longer. The next day, when David was wandering around outside the lighthouse, Lucky saw a ship out at sea. He quickly grabbed a flare gun from inside and went to signal the ship. But Kroner, he stopped him because he didn't want David to leave. Right then, Anarius attacked Kroner. She wanted to protect David from Kroner. Kroner didn't want anyone leaving this island. This island was his own world, where he lived like a king. He didn't want David to leave either. After being alone for so long, he finally had someone to talk to, and if David went back on that ship, he'd tell everyone about Anarius and them. So David couldn't leave now. Slowly, the ship disappeared into the sea right before David's eyes. Now he had nothing left to do. A few more days passed just like that. Kroner was still treating both David and Anarius badly, but he was especially harsh on Anarius, which David really didn't like. One day, David gave Anarius a small toy boat he had made from a fish bone as a gift. But when Anarius saw the boat, he took David to a corner of the island where there was actually a real boat kept. When David asked Kroner about this boat, he said yes, he already knew there was a boat on this part of the island. Kroner said some people had come to this island by boat to save their lives. But before morning, none of them survived. Those creatures killed them all. They were carrying ammunition on the ship. But because of a storm at sea, their ship sank near this island. As soon as David heard all this, an idea popped into his head. They had something like a diving suit. David said that if either of us wears that suit and goes into that part of the sea, They decided to go to the spot where the ship had sunk, hoping to find some bullets or dynamite that might make fighting those creatures easier. But Kroner refused to believe that. Still, David was ready to risk his life to try. A few more days passed like this. A strong bond developed between David and Anarias. David started to like her. Kroner secretly watched them getting close. He feared Anarias would take David away from him. So, he figured he had to get rid of David. The next day, Kroner himself talked to David. He agrees. He tells David, "Alright, you wear a suit and go down into the water to collect a bunch of RDX. Then I'll pull you back up to the boat." But Kroner's real plan was something else. He wanted David to help him bring up the boxes of dynamite hidden under the sea, and then leave him alone out there so the creatures would kill him. That way, the dynamite would be his, and Anarias would become his slave again. They both got into the boat, and headed to the spot where the ship was sunk underwater. David put on his diving suit, and went down into the sea. Once he got down, he saw the ship was completely wrecked. But luckily, he found some boxes of dynamite. Suddenly, some creatures appeared in front of him. Seeing them, David freaked out and fell down. The diving suit was so heavy that he couldn't move, and he couldn't send a signal up to Kroner. Kroner thought the creatures might have killed David, but it turned out they were just two little kids. David somehow managed to leave his diving suit there, and made his way up to the surface. There they found some old boxes filled with dynamite. After that, the two of them got to work. They laid down 2 layers of dynamite around the lighthouse so that when the next attack happened, they could take out the monsters all at once. A few months passed, and winter came with heavy snowfall. But once again, the creatures disappeared. Suddenly, the attacks just stopped, like the creatures somehow knew a trap was waiting for them. That's why they weren't attacking anymore. Kroner thought maybe Anarias had warned those creatures. That's why he started taking it out on Anarias, but David stopped him. In the end, they both came up with a new plan, to leave the lighthouse's main gate open so that as soon as the creatures got close, they could blow them all up with dynamite. David cleverly told Anarias to shout from the top of the lighthouse. As soon as the creatures heard Anarias's voice, they got furious. When the creatures saw the main gate of the lighthouse was open, they thought that this is a good chance to rescue Anarias. But actually it was a trap for them. After a while, the creatures started coming out of the sea. They headed straight for the main gate, and attacked David as soon as they got inside. David fights back bravely and manages to escape from the creatures. As soon as they all reach near the creature lighthouse, Kroner pulls the lever of the dynamite, but it doesn't explode. Actually, David had disconnected the wires, and Kroner forgot to reconnect them. David quickly runs upstairs to fix the dynamite's wiring. It starts. Meanwhile, the creatures keep trying to climb the lighthouse, but only the lone Kroner is holding them back. As soon as the connection is complete, David blows up the first layer, wiping out a bunch of creatures in the blast. But there are still plenty of monsters ready to attack the lighthouse. So, Kroner blows up the second layer too. Both of them pass out from the massive explosion. The next morning, when they come to, they see Anarias is gone. The blast left dead creatures all around. They were lying there. Kroner was killing everyone who had survived, even if they were wounded. Then David noticed a necklace hanging around one of their necks. Seeing that creature writhing in pain made David feel sorry for it, and he realized his mistake. The creatures he had always thought were vicious were actually like humans, just couldn't talk. But to Kroner, none of that mattered. After that day, the creatures never attacked again. Still, every day, crying could be heard from the shore. David hadn't yet realized how much damage they had caused. So many families broke apart. So many kids lost their loved ones. All because of one misunderstanding. The next day, David saw some tiny little babies of those creatures in the sea. The ones who had lost their families. David made a circle out of stones and placed a small toy boat in the middle, hoping Anarias would see it and come back. He waited for hours, but Anarias never returned. The next morning, when David woke up, he saw Kroner sleeping. Kroner had some old stuff nearby, including an old photo, and as soon as David looked at the photo and was stunned. The girl in the picture was the same one he'd seen in old Officer Robert's diary on the first day. She was none other than Kroner's wife, and Kroner was standing right beside her in the photo. Actually, the weather officer Robert who came a year ago hadn't died. He had just changed his identity. In other words, Kroner is weather officer Robert. He'd just changed his name because he never wanted to leave this island again. Seeing all this, David gave up hope of ever leaving the island. The next evening, when David was by the sea, David went over and saw that the small boat that had been in the circle was gone. But right there, he spotted a tiny creature's baby holding the boat in its hands. David threw the burning wood he was holding into the middle of the circle to show he didn't want to fight and wasn't a threat to anyone. He wanted to be friends with them. After a while, Anarus emerged from the ocean waves, followed by the whole group of creatures coming out of the water. But this time, no one attacked David because they all wanted peace now. They just want a safe place for their kids. But then Kroner shows up with a gun in his hand. Kroner thinks that if things get peaceful, how will he feel like he's on top? David tries to explain that these creatures don't want to fight. They want peace. But Kroner doesn't listen to anyone. He yells at Anarius to go inside. But this time was different. Anarius didn't listen because she wasn't his servant anymore. Seeing this, Kroner realizes that on this island, the kingdom was gone. Kroner started feeling weak inside because no one was listening to his orders anymore. Angry, he stormed towards the lighthouse. David thought maybe Kroner finally understood that every creature wants freedom. No one wants to live as someone's slave. But the idea of being king wasn't leaving Kroner's mind that easily. As soon as he reached the lighthouse, he fired a flare from his signal gun, which hit a creature's child right on the spot. The child died instantly. Terrified, all the creatures ran away, and Anarius. David had completely lost trust in him too. Furious, David immediately ran towards the lighthouse to teach Kroner a lesson. He started fighting him. Why did you do all this? These people just wanted peace. But Kroner had become so violent that he decided to kill David. Just as he was about to strike David with an iron rod, David called him by his real name and said, "Stop, Robert, you're not a killer." Hearing this, Kroner froze. The truth was, Robert was never really like that. Since coming to this island, living alone, his mental health had deteriorated because of it. Loneliness, the death of his wife, and deep depression had all changed him. He wasn't really a killer. He was a good person. Kroner realized that these creatures never wanted to fight. They just wanted peace. Kroner had only killed them to make himself feel powerful, and now he understood his mistake. That's why he surrendered himself to those creatures, and within moments, they killed him. David locked himself inside the lighthouse. Time went by, and a year later, a government officer showed up on the island. Along with him was a new weather officer. The new government officer was supposed to take up weather monitoring duties on the island. When the captain asked David about the previous officer, David gave the same story, that he went towards the water but never came back. The weather officer also thought David was the groaner. David didn't correct their misunderstanding. He just quietly went out to the balcony and stood there without saying a word. Because now he didn't want to leave the island either. It was just like Kroner. During this time, Anarus was also happy with her family. Now, she wasn't afraid of any guy like Kroner. She could live freely on the island and in the sea. And that's where the story ends. If you guys like this video, subscribe for more.